Elizabeth Warren finally gave a not shitty answer when she was asked about Medicare for All last night at the first debate for the 2020 Democratic primary. Her answer is about a minute long. One of the main reasons I don't like this answer is because, to me, it seems like she's trying to rewrite history. In this answer, she's going to make it seem like she's been with Bernie Sanders on Medicare for All this whole time, and that she's seen the private health insurance companies as the main problem in our healthcare system this whole time, but that's just not true. It's been well documented and recorded that ever since Elizabeth Warren launched her campaign, one of the main topics of discussion among the left has been that Elizabeth Warren is backpedaling away from Medicare for All, and that she's pushing corporatist alternatives to Medicare for All, like making improvements to the Affordable Care Act or lowering the eligibility age for Medicare, having Medicare buy-ins, having employers provide a Medicare plan to their employee, similar to how the private health insurance system works today. So even your biggest defenders, and I'm talking about people in independent media like TYT's Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland, or even David Pakman, everyone on the left agrees that Elizabeth Warren's position on healthcare is woefully lacking. So I guess one of my biggest problems with Elizabeth Warren's answer here is basically what she's telling every single leftist in independent media and their listeners and viewers is, don't believe your lying eyes. I know that for the entire 6 months of my campaign, I've been backpedaling away from Medicare for All, and anytime I'm forced to talk about it, I would also bring up corporatist alternatives to Medicare for All that would largely leave the private health insurance industry intact. But I'm still going to tell you I'm with Bernie Sanders on Medicare for All. And the reason she gives for why she claims she supports Medicare for All makes me believe her even less. So she says she's with Bernie on Medicare for All. I have to ask, how does that claim manifest itself? If you were with Bernie on Medicare for All, then 6 months into your campaign, the entirety of lefty independent media wouldn't be questioning how committed you are to the policy, because you'd be clear and concise and unwavering in your support for it. Back in the 2016 primary, when Bernie Sanders ran his entire campaign on Medicare for All, were you with him? No, you actually endorsed his opponent who said Medicare for All would never come to pass. In fact, I don't believe Elizabeth Warren even mentioned Medicare for All or single payer during the entire 2016 election season. Were you with Bernie Sanders when he was going city to city doing countless televised and untelevised town hall events, relentlessly advocating for Medicare for All? Bernie Sanders made it his personal mission to get everyone covered under Medicare for All. Most people laughed at him and thought a change like that would never happen, not even in 100 years. But Bernie Sanders led a movement that not only raised public knowledge on the issue, he raised public support, all while being attacked and smeared relentlessly by the entire establishment and anyone who defends the status quo. It's a direct result of the activism of Bernie Sanders' movement. Medicare for All is now insanely popular, so much so that even the establishment can't deny how popular it is now. Elizabeth Warren wasn't publicly with Bernie Sanders in any of that. Elizabeth Warren was not shooting with Bernie Sanders in the gym. Some who defend Warren might say she didn't mean she was literally there with Bernie. She just means ideologically she aligns with him on this issue. If that's your defense, you are confirming one of my biggest criticisms of Elizabeth Warren, which is that she's all talk but no action. When the time comes to actually fight for important issues, she's nowhere to be found. But she will grandstand and talk tough when it's politically convenient for her to do so. But let's get past that. If you really believe that she meant ideologically she's with Bernie Sanders on Medicare for All, well, that's just not true either, and I'm about to prove that. So in her answer, she clarifies why she supports Medicare for All, because she, quote, spent the majority of her life researching why families go broke, and the top reason is medical costs. Then she goes on to lambaste the private health insurance industry for raising the cost of deductibles and premiums and co-pays, and she says that the private health insurance industry is the real problem. If I could ask her a follow-up, It would be, so after all your years of research, you didn't realize that the private health insurance industry was the problem with our healthcare system until tonight. Because understand, she's right that any real research into why families can't afford the cost of healthcare would lead you to the conclusion that the private health insurance industry is the problem. But that fact has been true for a very long time. It's been true for your entire time in the Senate. It was true during the 2016 campaign, but I have never once heard Elizabeth Warren make an unequivocal defense of Medicare for all while simultaneously condemning the private health insurance industry until she was on that debate stage last night. In the last 6 months of her campaign, every time she's asked about healthcare, her answers always make it seem that she's more down with the private health insurance system than she should be. She said she likes where the Democratic Party is on the issue of healthcare. The Democratic Party that is being led by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who have spent their entire careers in the pocket of the private health insurance industry and Big Pharma, blocking Medicare for all and going to bat for their big donors in the healthcare industry. The Democratic Party, whose bold vision for healthcare is at best making improvements to the Affordable Care Act, which is just a giant giveaway to the private health insurance industry. In fact, Elizabeth Warren herself, whenever she's asked about healthcare, usually goes into a long tirade explaining how we need to defend the Affordable Care Act before we do anything else. And she suggests tweaks that we can do to make it better. Elizabeth Warren says she wants everyone at the table to come up with a solution to our healthcare crisis. And by everyone, she's talking about the private health insurance companies too. And mind you, this is what she's been campaigning on. These are her answers on the campaign trail. In none of those instances on the campaign trail has Elizabeth Warren said that the private health insurance industry is a problem. But I'm supposed to believe her when she says her years of research led her to the conclusion that the private health insurance industry is a problem and Medicare for all is the solution. Those things are not congruent. You can't campaign for 6 months and every single time you're asked about healthcare, bring up alternatives to Medicare for all that mostly benefit the private health insurance industry. But then when you're on the debate stage, you're going to tell me that the main problem is the private health insurance industry. I'm not even going to speculate why she's doing it. I'm not even going to say she's an evil or wicked person for doing this. All I'm saying is Elizabeth Warren's answer on Medicare for all last night on that debate stage does not line up with every single answer she's given on the issue of healthcare since she started her campaign. And anyone who is taking her answer last night at face value and saying, oh, now I completely believe that Elizabeth Warren is going to fight for Medicare for all, without giving you the context of how shitty she's been on the issue of healthcare for this entire campaign and really her entire career, is either incredibly naive or trying to mislead you. And some people might say that this is a debate with a bunch of people on stage and there are time constraints. So if she had a minute to answer, it makes more sense to defend Medicare for all rather than explaining why she's been wishy-washy on the issue. To that I say, okay, you have a point that with a minute it makes more sense to defend Medicare for all, but she didn't have to lie about her position. She is not and has not been, quote, with Bernie Sanders on Medicare for all. I don't believe the reason why she supports Medicare for all now is the reason that she gave last night on that stage. Because she's never said that before, ever. And also, a lot of the healthcare plans that she's endorsing don't address the problem that she is now saying is the main problem in our healthcare system. She's lying about Medicare for all. Or at the very least, her actions and previous answers are not lining up with what she said on that debate stage. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, she's doing a very weird don't believe you lying eyes thing here. If your position on Medicare for all this entire time during the campaign had been, I'm with Bernie Sanders, the private health insurance system that we have in place in the United States is the main problem and Medicare for all is a solution, we need a government-run single-payer healthcare system, no one would be skeptical of Elizabeth Warren on the issue of healthcare. But always in the top two concerns that people on the progressive left have of Elizabeth Warren has been her non-committal position on Medicare for all. But now, since Elizabeth Warren for once gives a quick, unequivocal defense of Medicare for all with absolutely no pushback, we're all supposed to believe that she's just like Bernie Sanders on the issue of healthcare. I'm not buying it. Anyone who's buying Elizabeth Warren's convenient defense of Medicare for all last night, I need you to answer this question for me. If Elizabeth Warren does actually believe what she said about Medicare for all last night on that debate stage, why hasn't that been her answer on the issue of healthcare this entire time? She could have saved herself a bunch of bad press and independent media if she would have, every time she's asked about healthcare, she gave that same exact answer she gave last night. Why has Elizabeth Warren given every single answer except that answer? Warren already didn't trust Elizabeth Warren to fight for Medicare for all. Her lying about it on the debate stage 100% confirms I'm right not to trust her to fight for Medicare for all. And I have to be honest with you, before the debate, I was thinking long and hard about, is there an answer that Elizabeth Warren could give on the issue of healthcare that I would find acceptable? And the answer is no. Because either she was going to come out and do her wishy-washy, equivocating bullshit and continue to backpedal away from Medicare for all. In that case, my opinion on her about the issue of healthcare wouldn't really change that much. I already don't believe she's going to fight for Medicare for all, so if she comes out and equivocates on it. But I also thought if she comes out and gives the full-throated defense of Medicare for all, that still won't do it for me because it comes off as politically convenient. Because she has not full-throatedly defended Medicare for all up to this point, as I've laid out already. So her giving a unapologetic defense of Medicare for all on the debate stage would just her be lying about her position, because that just has not been her position, and she's adopting a brand new position because she thinks it's convenient for her and it would work out better for her on that debate stage at that very moment on that night. I'm not wrong for that. At this late date in 2019, we should not have to drag our potential presidential nominee to the position of Medicare for all kicking and screaming. We shouldn't have to try to wrangle and fucking wrestle Elizabeth Warren to the obviously correct position on healthcare. But that seems to be exactly what we've had to do for the last 6 months, because the more she's been backing away from Medicare for all every chance she gets and pushing corporatist alternatives. So even if she did come out on the debate stage and give lip service to the correct position on the healthcare crisis in the United States, that does not in any way mean we should trust you to lead the fight as president to get Medicare for all. No way in hell. If in April or March or February of 2019, you weren't giving that very same answer when asked about healthcare, I really don't care that you just come around to it late June 2019. Because that means you don't believe in it as much as I need you to believe in it to fight for it as much as I need you to fight for it. And that's just what it is with Elizabeth Warren. So she shot herself in the foot. She kind of dug this own grave, because I don't see how any progressive can, in good faith, clear of mind, say, I trust Elizabeth Warren to fight for Medicare for all. I don't see how you can do it. And there's nothing that she can say to change my mind, at least, on that issue. That's how I feel on that topic. So if anybody's walking away from the first debate thinking, oh yeah, Elizabeth Warren is solidly, firmly going to fight for Medicare for all, I strongly disagree with you, and I urge you to take another look at your analysis, because you're walking away with the wrong conclusion.